Good afternoon. My name is Parker Nickerson, and today I will be presenting Distorted Realities, Media's Influence in an Age of Sensationalism. American media, once a pillar for the transfer of accurate and reliable information, has devolved into a sensationalist industry, prioritizing profits and views over the virtues of informing and educating the general public. The corruption of the United States media outlets has ultimately led to a decline in engagement and critical thinking. If the major source of information is not telling Americans what they need to know, who can we trust? The concept of free speech is one of which America is built. However, journalists, pundits, and reporters choose to share information which only benefits themselves or their organizations, rather than sharing what needs to be shared, which is often the cold, hard truth. Thomas Jefferson famously said, "The press, confined to truth, needs no other legal restraint, but the press which is in the hands of men who lie for money or power is a dangerous engine. Yet I would rather have too much of this evil than any restriction on the freedom of the press." Jefferson believed freedom of the press to be a necessary evil, even as he faced the repercussions himself. During his presidency, he was accused of everything from cowardice to atheism. But this did not stop his vision of all men having the right to know the business of their country. During times such as the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, journalism fostered national discourse and informed citizens. Media outlets over time have sadly chosen the path of fame and fortune rather than doing their job and informing the common man. On June 17th, 1994, 95 million Americans flocked to their television sets to watch as a white Bronco fled the police at a relatively slow speed. In that Bronco drove Al Cowlings, and in the back of that Bronco sat Orenthal James Simpson. O.J. Simpson, a once famous running back for the Buffalo Bills and the San Francisco 49ers, was now fleeing the police and pointing a gun at his own head. News helicopters flew to the scene of the chase to get their best view for their channel. It seemed as if everyone had stopped to tune in and watch this astounding event. O.J. Simpson had been accused of murdering his ex-wife, Nicole Brown, and her friend, Ronald Goldman, after they had both been found brutally stabbed outside of Nicole's condominium. After his arrest, the trial of O.J. Simpson made it seem as if the cameras had never stopped. Continuous live coverage of the full trial appeared on television. Courtroom cameras turned into episodes. People picked sides for which to cheer for, while lawyers and witnesses became not only local celebrities, but national ones, with even Robert Kardashian renewing his law license just to gain a spot on O.J.'s defense team, in the end creating the Kardashian name. O.J. Simpson was found not guilty. But why? It seemed as if all the evidence had pointed to him very boldly. Could someone's personal media presence truly affect their position in the legal system? The entire trial, from the very first helicopter filming of Simpson to the champagne parties after the verdict, was an appeal to emotion. The trial of O.J. Simpson had not just become a circus to watch on television, but in the courtroom as well. Both the media outlets and the court seemed to emphasize the conflict of the situation rather than the plain facts. In what kind of world does it seem right that the people who are supposed to inform Americans can affect them so much that it can even taint their legal system? Media, by definition, is the mass means of communication. As the media has become a household staple for almost all American families, viewers have become blinded to the facts. The primary goal of media outlets in our modern age is wealth and power, not to inform the masses. Michael Knowles discusses in his book, Speechless, Controlling Words, Controlling Minds, how media outlets manipulate our way of thinking through uses of propaganda, sensationalism, degradation, and semantics. Knowles' main motive is to make readers aware of how free speech absolutism has backfired and ultimately allowed false truth to grow stronger than truth itself. According to the most visible participants in this system are what some call legacy media or mainstream media. These are the outlets which have held their position in American media for decades and are those that Americans turn to for information. CBS, NBC, ABC, and the New York Times are the primary culprits. These outlets engage in propaganda and sensationalism through omitting the inconvenient, clever facts. Distorted output from these outlets are extremely dangerous due to the deeply developed cult following each of them possess. Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines sensationalism as empiricism that limits experience as a source of knowledge. In other words, sensationalism is the purposeful exaggeration of a topic or idea to make it seem bigger than it actually is. Sensationalism's goal is to destroy the middle ground of agreement and slowly push a viewer either left or right. The most notorious example of sensationalism in media is what is called yellow journalism, leading up to the Spanish-American War. Both William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer employed sensationalism in their writings discussing the atrocities of the war, such as the claim that the USS Maine's explosion was caused by a Spanish mine, which to this day has no absolute proof. Accounts recall William Randolph Hearst telling his illustrator, Frederick Remington, "You furnish the pictures, and I will furnish the war." With more recent developments with applications such as TikTok, Instagram, and X, sensationalism and propaganda grow more dangerous as their engagement-driven algorithms feed off of agendas. The media outlets no longer upholds the trustworthiness it once held. News is no longer news. It's entertainment, something fed to people in the name of profit. Some might say, news reflects reality. However, this overlooks the fact that news is information from a third-party organization. It can be easily funded and easily decepted. Media outlets should work as a reliable window for viewers to clearly see modern events, discussions, and topics. When journalism fulfills its proper role in society, it strengthens the democratic process by allowing citizens to think clearly and act with wisdom. Most media outlets heavily accessed today by Americans work as a filter, either showing a partial reality or even a distorted reality, just as in the O.J. Simpson trial, when the media portrayed the events as a dramatic event rather than a standard legal proceeding. Content media outlets put out should be disciplined and truth-seeking. Qualities of a solely truth-centered outlet would include the following: objective reporting with no selective framing, facilitating public discourse by sharing multiple opinions, holding public trust by promptly removing and correcting errors, and acting as a fourth estate while keeping the other three branches and private power in check. While the media will always be flawed due to its creators being human, it's important to strive for virtue in all aspects of life. Sadly, Americans do not have the privilege of gaining information from an outlet that possesses these same values. The American citizens live entertained, but underinformed, leading to ignorance and societal harm. Another major problem in American media is the manufactured loop. Some people and organizations recognize that controlling the flow of information is the easiest way to shape society without holding office. In other words, in the form of a shadow government. The Open Society Foundation, founded by George Soros, donated $220 million in the name of racial justice after the death of George Floyd in 2020. This money was not only dispersed between racial activist groups, but directly to media outlets and journalists. The loop has 3 stages and begins with funding. Once the funding is in place, that money will go to make a narrative. Narratives produced by the loop are often one-sided and omit important contradictory details. Once this narrative is published, it will reach a target audience, which then will incite action. Then the third stage of the loop takes place, where the original funder of the narrative funds logistics, a protest, and even bail funds, creating the appearance of a spontaneous yet unified mob. Wherever this riot is, the media outlet will be there for in-depth, complete coverage, ultimately bringing more profit, more narratives, more action, turning the cycle over again. Charles Darwin's famous theory of survival of the fittest illustrates a media outlet's natural urge to survive and pass its rivals. The fittest outlet, defined by the highest ratings, home in on topics and semantics that will draw in viewers, naturally passing their rivals. The media culture often pushes journalists to try to fit into the inner ring. Thomas Sowell describes the media outlet's dynamic as working in a high school clique. Just as in a close friend group, journalists are often pushed to do things that the rest of the group wants in order to fit in. C.S. Lewis describes this pressure in his article, The Inner Ring, by saying, "Of all the passions, the passion for the inner ring is best at making a man who is not so very bad do very bad things." Journalists can easily sway their decision and writing due to facing fear of repercussion. In 1835, Great Britain was gifted with the knowledge new science research had brought. The Sun, a penny paper first published in 1833, published the works of the great Sir John Herschel, a renowned astronomer. Each day came a new discovery about the moon's surface. Lush mountains, green fields, and even life. Some of the first discoveries were cow-like creatures with bone visors to protect themselves from a brighter sun, bipedal tailless beavers, short-necked giraffes with curled horns, and even ordinary animals such as storks or goats. On August 25th, 1835, a new publication came out, disclosing the discovery of not just animal life, but humanoids living on the moon. These people, described as shorter than average, about 4 foot tall, covered in bronze fur, and possessing wings. The people, nicknamed the Bat People, were the center of news for weeks to come. Readers were astounded to hear how far science had brought them. But what if science hadn't come that far? On September 15th, 1835, the New York Herald, a rival newspaper of the New York Sun, published an article declaring that Sir John Herschel's work has been fabricated, and so was Sir John Herschel. Both the research and its creditors had turned out to be a hoax, all a part of an elaborate scheme created by a failing printing shop to sell more papers. Once this was published, it discredited the works of journalists and media outlets for years to come. In the case of the Great Moon hoax, the Sun's falsification of information in the same vein established a template for profitable media hoaxes for years to come. Both the Sun's articles on the moon's surface and the trial of O.J. Simpson are both great examples of sensationalized media in the name of profit. The trial of O.J. Simpson is often cited as the birth of 24/7 entertainment-based news. However, it is clear that this was the Sun's original goal as early as 1835. Dante's Inferno brings a warning to those who output false information and peace to those who listen. Dante places those guilty of fraudulent speech in Malbolge, the 8th circle of hell. Though not worthy of the 9th circle due to their indirect involvement of harming the receiver, these people face flames that not just burn them, but conceal them, just as their words once concealed evil intent. Dante's imagery reminds readers that sensationalism is not harmless. It is ultimately a betrayal of reasoned speech and trust. How do the American people combat the profit-driven media? Building off of Jefferson's original quote, discussing freedom of the press, he also says, "Were it left to me to decide whether to have a government without newspaper or a newspaper without government, I should not hesitate a moment to prefer the latter. But I should say that every man should receive these papers and be capable of reading them." Here, Jefferson not only stresses the importance of a free press, but also the importance of the receiver being able to understand. As Christians, we're ultimately called to seek truth in God. Biblical truth provides a perfect example for discernment. Romans 12:2 says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect." The Bible tells Christians that discernment is essential for our everyday lives, and even calls for Christians to test everything to see what is from God. R.C. Sproul observed, the greatest danger to the church is not from without, but from within, when we exchange the truth of God for a lie that feels more relevant. This equally parallels media trading objective reporting for emotionally resonant narratives. G.K. Chesterton says, "When men choose not to believe in God, they do not thereafter believe in nothing. They believe in anything." Thank you. I would now like to take questions from the judges.
I was very pleased to see you make a reference to the media or the journalism specifically as the fourth estate. You didn't say a lot about it. You put that phrase in there. I know what that is, but can you tell us what the fourth estate is and why the current media, at least national media, is not actually operating as the fourth estate?
So a media's original goal was to almost be a check of power for government and especially private power. When government gets too big or assumes too much power, the media acts as a fourth estate almost, recognizing the three branches as their own. And the media turning into almost a fourth branch, controlling and almost pushing the other three branches into what is right.
Thank you. And we're not, you're saying the current media is not
It hasn't.
fulfilling that duty?
It has failed its job as a fourth estate, I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question for you, Parker. Have you ever seen the movie? It's called A Few Good Men.
I've not.
I don't remember how old it is, but there's this line by who wrote it, Jack Nickerson, and he's in a branch of the military, and he's higher ranking. But throughout the movie, you find out that they've been withholding information, and there's this point where he's on trial, and he says, people say it all the time, but they say, "You can't handle the truth. So I want you to tell us, can we handle the truth?"
I believe it's a people's responsibility to find the truth themselves. Ultimately, we're called to find the truth ourselves. The Bible wants pure discernment for us. And I believe as American people, we're responsible for the truth.
Parker, I remember sitting and watching that O.J. Simpson thing for hours and hours and hours. It was mind-numbing. And it lasted for like 2 years. It was constant. Anyway, that's beside the point. So, did your research show our newspapers, our news sources, when they falsely report things and are, that's illuminated, are they fined in any way? What are the repercussions, or do they just not care?
The sad thing is that most media outlets, unless it contradicts with a specific law or copyright infringement, they are not, they don't face any punishment, or any repercussions in the end. It's just blown into the wind and almost either forgotten about or held to their name.
The other thing, I loved Paul Harvey, and I saw that you referenced Paul Harvey in your paper. Can you talk about that, please, since you didn't get to touch on it?
So Paul Harvey's If I Were the Devil is a radio broadcast almost in the same light as C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters, where Paul Harvey, himself voicing the devil, through that, it was an informative speech with the same goal as C.S. Lewis to almost show listeners how the devil works through in our everyday lives. In one of his lines, I believe it says, and through media, I would boost ratings in promise of money and just goods, basically. So through that, he shows how easily media can manipulate us as a people and how easily the media as a whole can be manipulated through the devil to bring false truth and just a bad light.
Good, thank you.
Parker, mine's kind of a two-part question. I'm not that old. I have TikTok, I see news on my TikTok all the time. I was a political science major, so it's just a lot of politics, right? Did anything in your research, lead you to see any statistics that showed, what % of Americans look at social media as their main source of news? Did you see anything like that?
I didn't see any direct percentages or anything, but I can definitely tell, especially from older articles and newer articles discussing political bias and a political affiliation in news media. Most, and even as someone my age, I can tell most people nowadays, especially 25 and younger, gain their information from a social media platform. That's with the mix of an actual media outlet posting on those platforms as well. But through my research, I have easily seen a more upbringing of social media centered news.
Cool. My second part to that is I'm sure there's some social distrust in the media. I think we can kind of see that. With the rise of social media, and like you just mentioned, a lot of these outlets are posting on the social media now. Do you believe that the future of media, is going to use just social media as a whole? Maybe kind of as these younger generations rise up, they use social media more than they watch cable television. So do you think that social media is the new news outlet,
Do I believe it is the new news outlet? Yes.
Okay.
Do I believe it is a good thing? Absolutely not. Does that answer your
Yes,
question?
that does answer your question. Thank you. Thank you.
Very decisive
Hey,
answer.
I guess I have in my head that you're talking about media sensationalizing things to get more viewers. I guess media companies are not public services. They're not run by the government. They're not meant to be for the public good. They're businesses that are meant to make money. Is it unfair to criticize them for trying to get people to watch them? So I'm just thinking about the weatherman who really boosts up the forecast. Oh, it's going to be really terrible. You got to tune in so you can catch all the latest on this, so you can make sure you watch the track of the storm. That's a little bit of sensationalism, right? To get people to watch. So do we fault the media companies for trying to get people to watch because that's what ultimately fuels their business? Is it wrong to hold them to a standard of, they're not a public service? I would love to hear your more thoughts about that.
Since it is not a government institution, as a business form in itself, it obviously has the will to grow itself, make itself the best, and ultimately bring revenue. In a sense of virtue that all of us should have, I feel like it should be their duty to be truthful instead of playing with viewers' emotions. Instead, bring a true, trustworthy relationship between viewer and media.
Okay, so I'm just with a clarifying question. So you talked about the sun and the the graphic with the weird creatures from the moon.
People.
So that you label as a hoax. So it seemed like you were drawing a correlation between that and the coverage of the O.J. Simpson trial. So was there a part of the O.J. Simpson trial you say is a hoax, or is it just sensationalized? I'm just trying to splice what you're trying to say there.
So covering it as the Great Moon Hoax, that's what it is called in the governmental records. So my actual source was
The O.J. Simpson trials?
No, the
Okay,
Great
yeah.
Moon Hoax.
Yeah, yeah.
It was from a .gov source, so that's what they have it labeled in public records.
Gotcha.
So I just used that title. I claim that the Great Moon Hoax is more of sensationalized media, and not just an actual hoax. It was to draw in viewers, sell more papers. That was their original goal.
And I think we still have a little more time. Can you say more about the inner ring? I'm not sure I completely understand what you're saying there. You talk about the inner ring, you quote C.S. Lewis. Can you say more about that?
So in C.S. Lewis's article, The Inner Ring, his purpose is more of pushing social standards. Just as in high school cliques, as I mentioned, people feel pressured to do certain actions that they normally wouldn't without the effect of an outside source. So they will do actions, say things that they normally wouldn't do in order to fit in. A media outlet standpoint from the inner ring, a whole media outlet is not just one being. It's built up of multiple different journalists with different views, and then they write for that media outlet. With the inner ring, journalists are often pushed to write to a certain standard and belief that they normally wouldn't, but due to fear of facing repercussion, those journalists will sway their writings in favor of the boss.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you.
You said something a minute ago. I'm going back to what we were saying earlier about whether or not we can handle the truth, and you said it's our responsibility to know the truth, and you're right. And it's not the media's job to tell us if we can handle the truth. They should not have the power to say, oh, we'll tell them this. Oh, I don't think they can handle this other truth. So you're exactly right in saying that. And my days are. Today is Thursday. My days have kind of run together, but I think it was earlier this week. And I don't have the name. I know it had the American Poverty Center. I forget, but they indicted them this week because it has apparently come out that they were paying other organizations to kind of manufacture hate. Mm-hmm. That's the way it was worded when I was listening to the news. Mm-hmm. Do you think the media is trying to manufacture hate, and why or why not?
I could easily see, and I also discussed this in my paper more, how the media builds off of public unrest, and they can easily turn that hate into something they can show on TV. More airtime, more topics to talk about that ultimately brings profit.
You're exactly right. We probably have time for one more question.
I would now like to open the floor for questions. Does anyone have a question? Andrew.
Parker, one of mine and yours favorite websites, it's a news website, is the Babylon Bee. It's something that is satire, so we know that they're not trying to directly tell us the truth. Is sometimes knowing that things aren't going to tell you the full truth, so you're on the lookout already, is that more helpful to know sometimes?
From a personal standpoint, through satire, I gain most of my information. The Babylon Bee is probably one of the most heavily accessed news outlets, in my opinion. Just through that, I can learn things and kind of start myself on a topic, and then I can go deeper into it with other resources to learn more. And I don't know if anyone else kind of works through that way, but it almost seems like opposite, but people tend to work through that way as well. There are no further questions. Thank you.